Alright, picture this. Jimmy Fallon, the king of late-night comedy, the guy who's made every A-list celebrity crack up on national television, sits down and watches hours of Stray Kids content. V-Lives, variety shows, backstage chaos, fan meetings, the whole thing. And then he does something nobody expected. He ranks them. All 8 members. From, yeah, this guy's funny, to this guy is a comedy genius. Now here's where it gets wild, because if you think you already know who's sitting at number 1, I promise you probably don't. See, Jimmy Fallon doesn't just look at who tells the best jokes. He looks at timing. He looks at delivery. He looks at physical comedy, improvisation, the ability to make an entire room lose it without even trying. And that changes everything. So let me ask you this. Which member made Fallon literally pause the video and rewind because he couldn't believe what he just saw? Which member does Fallon say has the most dangerous comedic timing he's ever seen from a non-comedian? And which member, the one Stay would never guess, does Fallon call the funniest idol walking the planet right now? 8 members. 8 ranks. Only 1 throne. Let's get into it. Number 8. Hyunjin. The prince who makes you laugh without permission. Now before anyone in the comments starts throwing things at me, before the Hyunjin bias stays start typing in all caps, let me make one thing absolutely crystal clear. Being number 8 on this list is not an insult. It's not a diss. It's not shade. Because this list isn't about talent. It's not about stage presence. It's not about who's the best dancer or who's the most captivating performer. This list is specifically about one thing and one thing only: comedy. Raw, unfiltered, laugh until your stomach hurts comedy. And when Jimmy Fallon sat down and analyzed every single member of Stray Kids through the lens of a professional comedian, someone who has spent over 2 decades making people laugh for a living, he had to make hard choices. And putting Hwang Hyunjin at number 8? He said it was one of the hardest decisions on the entire list. Because here's what Fallon noticed immediately: Hyunjin is not unfunny. Not even close. In fact, Fallon described him as the member who surprises you with humor when you least expect it. And that's the thing about Hyunjin that most people don't talk about enough. Everyone's so busy being mesmerized by his visuals, by those sharp features, by that ethereal stage presence that makes him look like he was sculpted by Renaissance artists, that they completely overlook the fact that this man is genuinely, authentically hilarious when he lets his guard down. And Jimmy Fallon caught that. He caught it immediately. Fallon specifically pointed to Stray Kids appearances on variety shows where Hyunjin would be sitting there, quiet, composed, looking like a painting that accidentally came to life, and then out of nowhere, he'd do something so unexpectedly goofy that the entire room would erupt. That's a very specific type of humor. Fallon calls it the ambush laugh, when someone who looks like they have absolutely no business being funny suddenly hits you with something that catches you completely off guard. And Hyunjin has that in abundance. Let's talk about the facts for a second, because this isn't just about vibes and feelings. Hwang Hyunjin, born March 20th, 2000, is objectively one of the most visually stunning idols in the entire 4th generation of K-pop. That's not opinion, that's industry consensus. He's been called the face of the 4th generation by multiple Korean media outlets. His fan cams regularly break records. His visual impact is so strong that people who don't even follow K-pop know his face. And that creates a very specific comedic dynamic that Fallon found fascinating. See, in comedy, there's a concept called expectation subversion. It's one of the oldest tricks in the book. You set up an expectation and then you shatter it. And Hyunjin does this naturally, without even thinking about it, simply because of who he is. When you look at Hyunjin, you expect elegance. You expect poise. You expect someone who takes himself very seriously. And then he opens his mouth and does something so chaotically unhinged that your brain short-circuits, because it doesn't match the visual you were processing. Fallon pointed to a specific moment during a fan meeting where Hyunjin was supposed to do a sexy concept for a game, and instead of playing it cool, he committed so hard to the bit that he ended up making the most ridiculous face imaginable, completely destroying the mood in the best way possible. The other members were on the floor. The fans were screaming. And Hyunjin just stood there with this satisfied little grin like he knew exactly what he did. That's comedy. That is comedy. But here's where Fallon had to draw the line, and this is important because it explains why Hyunjin lands at number 8 despite having genuine comedic chops. Fallon said, and I quote, "Hyunjin is funny in bursts. He's like a comedic sniper. He takes one perfect shot and then disappears back into being beautiful. But comedy, sustained comedy, the kind that makes you the funniest person in a room, that requires consistency. That requires volume. And Hyunjin doesn't give you volume. He gives you precision. And honestly, that's a brilliant analysis. Think about it. When you watch Stray Kids content, Hyunjin isn't the member who's constantly cracking jokes. He's not the one who turns every situation into a comedy sketch. He's the one who sits back, observes, and then strikes at the perfect moment with one devastating move. It's quality over quantity, and while that makes him incredibly entertaining to watch, it also means that in a ranking based purely on comedic output, he can't compete with members who are running comedy at full speed 24/7. Fallon also brought up something really interesting about Hyunjin's relationship with physical comedy. Now, Hyunjin is a dancer, one of the best in the industry. His body control is insane. And Fallon noticed that when Hyunjin does physical comedy, it's actually rooted in his dance training. The exaggerated movements, the dramatic flailing, the way he throws his entire body into a bit, it all comes from his understanding of how bodies move in space. Fallon compared it to how Jim Carrey uses his background in physical performance to elevate his comedy. The difference, Fallon noted, is that Carrey made physical comedy his entire identity, while Hyunjin treats it like a side quest. It's there, it's brilliant when it shows up, but it's not the main storyline. And let's be real about something else. Hyunjin's humor is deeply tied to his emotional expressiveness. This is a man who cries during emotional moments, who wears his heart on his sleeve, who feels things deeply and isn't afraid to show it. And that emotional range? It actually makes his comedy hit harder. Because when someone who is usually sensitive and artistic suddenly does something absurd, the contrast amplifies the humor exponentially. Fallon called this emotional leverage, the idea that the more dimensions a person shows, the funnier their comedic moments become because you have more context for why it's unexpected. Hyunjin has enormous emotional leverage. Every single time. There's also the matter of Hyunjin's iconic moments that have become memes in the Stay fandom. The dramatic reactions during games. The over-the-top responses when he's teased by other members, especially by Lee No and Seungmin, who seem to have made it their life mission to test Hyunjin's patience. The way he whines and protests with such theatrical intensity that you can't tell if he's genuinely upset or performing a one-man Broadway show. These moments are comedy gold, and Fallon acknowledged every single one of them. But he kept coming back to the same point: frequency and consistency. In the comedy world, Fallon explained, there's a difference between someone who has funny moments and someone who is funny as a core identity trait. Hyunjin has funny moments. Incredible ones. Unforgettable ones. Moments that live rent-free in stays heads forever. But his core identity isn't comedy. His core identity is artistry, visual excellence, emotional depth, and performance. Comedy is a tool he pulls out when the moment calls for it, not the engine that drives his entire personality. And that distinction, as subtle as it sounds, is what separates number 8 from the members sitting higher on this list. Fallon ended his analysis of Hyunjin with something that honestly gave me chills. He said, if Hyunjin ever decided to make comedy his focus, if he ever channeled that visual contrast and emotional range into a dedicated comedic persona, he wouldn't just be funny. He'd be devastating. He has all the raw materials. He just chooses to build something else with them. And honestly, that's what makes him fascinating. So there you have it. Number 8. Hwang Hyunjin. The Prince of Unexpected Laughs. The comedic sniper who takes one perfect shot and walks away. Not the funniest member by volume, but absolutely the one who proves that sometimes the most beautiful face in the room is also the one that'll make you laugh the hardest when you least expect it. Number 7. Felix. The sunshine weapon you never see coming. Okay. I already know what's happening right now. I can feel the energy shifting. Because the second you saw Felix's name attached to number 7, half of you nodded and the other half are already furious. And that's exactly what makes this ranking so fascinating, because Felix is one of those members where the comedy conversation gets really, really complicated. And Jimmy Fallon? He spent more time analyzing Felix than almost anyone else on this list. Not because Felix is hard to understand, but because Felix represents something that Fallon says is one of the rarest comedic phenomena in entertainment. His exact words. And when a man who has interviewed literally thousands of the funniest people on earth calls you a rare comedic phenomenon, you better believe there's a story behind it. So let's get into why Lee Felix, born February 15, 2000, in Sydney, Australia, lands at number 7, and why Fallon says this placement is simultaneously the most accurate and the most unfair ranking on the entire list. First, let's establish something that most people outside the Stay fandom don't fully appreciate. Felix's voice. That voice. That impossibly, absurdly, almost cosmically deep voice that comes out of a face that looks like it was designed by an angel with a soft light filter. This is the foundation of everything when it comes to Felix's comedy, and Fallon identified it within the first 30 seconds of watching Felix content. He literally stopped the video, turned to the camera, and said, "Wait, that voice comes out of that face? Are you kidding me?" And that reaction? That moment of pure disbelief. That is Felix's comedic superpower. The contrast. The absolute, brain-breaking, physics-defying contrast between what you see and what you hear. Fallon went deep on this, and honestly, his analysis was kind of genius. He explained that in comedy, there's something called inherent incongruity, when a person's very existence is a contradiction that generates humor without them having to do anything. Felix has inherent incongruity dialed up to 11. He looks like a fairy. Soft features, freckles scattered across his face like someone flicked golden paint at a canvas, a smile that could end wars, an aura so warm and gentle that people literally describe being near him as healing. And then he opens his mouth and sounds like he should be narrating a documentary about deep-sea volcanoes. That contrast alone is comedy. It's automatic comedy. Every single time Felix speaks in a context where someone isn't expecting it, the reaction is laughter. Not because he said something funny, but because the experience of hearing that voice from that face is inherently hilarious and delightful. Fallon compared it to something really specific and actually quite brilliant. He compared it to the comedic principle that made actors like Leslie Nielsen legendary. Nielsen looked like a serious, dignified leading man. He had the face of a dramatic actor. But he used that appearance as a weapon, playing absurd comedy with complete sincerity, and the contrast between his serious exterior and the ridiculous content created a unique comedic frequency that nobody else could replicate. Fallon says Felix operates on that same frequency, except Felix doesn't even have to try. It just happens naturally every time he exists in a room. But here's where the analysis gets deeper, and this is where Fallon started to really separate the rankings. Felix's humor, beyond the voice contrast, is what Fallon categorized as wholesome comedy. And before anyone thinks that's a lesser form of comedy, Fallon was very clear wholesome comedy is one of the hardest forms to pull off because it requires genuine, unmanufactured warmth. You can't fake it. If you try to be wholesomely funny and you're not actually a warm person, it comes across as cringe. It falls flat. It feels performative. But Felix? Felix radiates warmth like the sun radiates heat. It's not a choice. It's not a persona. It's just who he is. And that means when Felix does something funny, it always comes wrapped in this layer of pure, undiluted sweetness that makes you laugh and feel good at the same time. Fallon pointed to Felix's iconic cooking content as a prime example. Now, if you're a Stay, you know about Felix and baking. This man has turned baking into an entire subplot of Stray Kids' story. His brownies are legendary. His desserts have become a symbol of his love language. He literally shows affection by feeding people. And the comedy in Felix's cooking content isn't that he's bad at it or that things go wrong. The comedy is in his enthusiasm. The way he narrates what he's doing with that impossibly deep voice while looking absolutely adorable in an apron. The way he gets so genuinely excited about a batch of cookies that you'd think he just discovered the cure for a disease. The way he offers food to the other members with this puppy dog energy that makes it literally impossible to say no. It's funny because it's so pure. In a world of sarcasm and irony and cynical humor, Felix operates on sincerity, and that sincerity in itself becomes a form of comedy because it's so unexpected in the current cultural landscape. Fallon also analyzed Felix's language humor, and this is something that doesn't get enough credit. Felix grew up in Australia. English is his first language. He moved to Korea and had to learn Korean, and now he operates in both languages fluidly. But the comedic goldmine here is in the transitions. The moments where Felix switches between languages mid-sentence, where he uses Australian slang that the Korean members don't understand, where his Korean pronunciation creates unintentional wordplay that sends everyone into fits. Fallon, as someone who works with language as a primary comedic tool, was genuinely impressed by how much humor Felix generates simply through the collision of his bilingual reality. He compared it to comedians who use their immigrant experience as comedic material, except Felix does it unconsciously, naturally, as a byproduct of simply living his multilingual life. And then there's what Fallon called Felix's chaos mode, those rare but absolutely glorious moments when Felix drops the sunshine persona and goes completely unhinged. If you've watched enough Stray Kids content, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Those moments during games or challenges where Felix suddenly reveals a competitive streak so intense that it doesn't match his usual gentle demeanor at all. The screaming. The dramatic reactions. The physical comedy that erupts when Felix gets frustrated or overexcited. Fallon was fascinated by these moments because they represent yet another layer of contrast, not just the voice-face contrast, but the personality contrast between soft Felix and unhinged Felix. And Fallon said something really smart about this. He said, Felix has multiple comedic gears, but he spends 90% of his time in first gear, warm, gentle, wholesome. And that's beautiful. But it also means that when he shifts into fifth gear, the shock value is enormous because you're so used to the softness that the chaos feels 10 times more chaotic. So why number 7? Why not higher? And this is where Fallon got really analytical, really precise, and honestly, really respectful. He said Felix's comedic limitation isn't ability, it's intent. Felix doesn't pursue comedy. He doesn't wake up and think, I'm going to be the funny one today. His humor is almost entirely a byproduct of his personality, his voice, his warmth, and his cultural duality. It happens to him more than it happens because of him. And in a ranking that measures comedic impact, that distinction matters. The members ranked above Felix are members who actively create comedy, who engineer funny moments, who have developed comedic identities that they deploy strategically. Felix's comedy is organic, natural, effortless, and paradoxically, that effortlessness is both his greatest strength and the reason he can't rank higher. Because the members above him on this list aren't just accidentally funny. They're intentionally hilarious, and they've weaponized their humor in ways that Felix simply doesn't need to. Fallon also made an observation that honestly kind of blew my mind. He said, Felix is the member that makes Stray Kids feel like a family instead of a group. And that warmth, that connective tissue he provides, it creates the environment where other members' comedy can thrive. He's the comedic ecosystem. He's not the punchline, he's the reason the punchline lands, because his energy makes everyone feel safe enough to be ridiculous. Think about that for a second. Fallon is essentially saying that Felix's contribution to Stray Kids' overall humor isn't measured by how many jokes he tells, but by how many jokes he enables everyone else to tell simply by being the warm, accepting, loving presence that makes the group dynamic feel safe and playful. That's not something you can rank on a comedy list, but it's something that deserves to be acknowledged, and Fallon made sure to acknowledge it heavily. He closed his Felix analysis with a line that I think every stay needs to hear. He said, if laughter is medicine, Felix is the spoonful of sugar that makes it go down. Number 6. Bang Chan. The leader whose dad jokes hit harder than you'll ever admit. Alright, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Or should I say, the kangaroo in the room, because this man is straight out of Sydney, and he brought every ounce of Australian humor with him when he crossed the ocean to become one of K-pop's most respected leaders. Bang Chan Christopher Bang. CB97. The man with more nicknames than most people have pairs of shoes, and every single one of those nicknames tells you something different about who he is. But here's the nickname Jimmy Fallon gave him after watching hours and hours of Stray Kids content, the Trojan horse of comedy. And when Fallon explained what he meant by that, I genuinely had to sit back and rethink everything I thought I knew about Bang Chan's role in Stray Kids' humor dynamic. Because Fallon didn't just analyze Chan's jokes. He analyzed Chan's entire system. And what he found was something that most stays feel instinctively, but have never been able to articulate. So let's break this down, because Bang Chan at number 6 is a placement that tells a much bigger story than just he's the 6th funniest member. Born October 3rd, 1997, Bang Chan is the oldest member of Stray Kids. He's the leader. He's a producer. He's a vocalist, a rapper, a dancer, a genuine all-rounder who spent 4 grueling years as a JYP entertainment trainee before finally debuting. For years. In an industry where trainees get cut every evaluation cycle, where the mental pressure is so intense that most people break, Chan survived and emerged not just intact, but as the foundation of what would become one of the biggest groups in the world. And that background? That history? It's directly connected to his comedy, and Fallon spotted it like a hawk. Here's what Fallon said, and honestly, this might be one of the most insightful observations on the entire list. He said, Bang Chan uses humor as leadership infrastructure. Every dad joke, every corny pun, every deliberately cringe moment, it's not accidental. It's architectural. He's building something with those jokes. He's building comfort. He's building morale. He's building a team culture where laughter isn't just entertainment, it's oxygen. And the second Fallon said that, everything clicked. Think about Chan's room. If you're a stay, you know Chan's room intimately. It's his regular V-Live broadcast where he sits down, usually late at night, puts on music, and just talks to stays. It's intimate. It's personal. It's one of the most beloved content series in all of K-pop fandom. And what does Chan do in almost every single Chan's room session? He cracks dad jokes. Terrible, wonderful, groan-inducing dad jokes that make you simultaneously cringe and smile. Puns that are so bad they loop back around to being good. Wordplay that sounds like it was written by a 45-year-old father of 3 who just discovered that jokes exist. And Fallon loved this. Not because the jokes themselves are comedically brilliant. Fallon was very honest about that. He said most of Chan's puns would bomb at any comedy club on the planet, but because of what those jokes do. They create warmth. They create a specific emotional temperature in the room that says, hey, it's okay. We're safe here. We can relax. Nobody's judging anyone. Fallon explained that in the late-night talk show world, he uses the exact same technique. The monologue jokes at the start of The Tonight Show aren't designed to be the funniest comedy anyone's ever heard. They're designed to warm up the room, to set a tone, to create an atmosphere where the audience feels comfortable enough to laugh freely for the rest of the show. And Chan does this for Stray Kids constantly, instinctively, like breathing. Every dad joke is a thermostat adjustment. Every corny pun is Chan saying, the temperature in here is perfect for being ourselves. But Fallon went deeper, and this is where the analysis got really interesting. Because beyond the dad jokes, beyond the puns, Chan has a comedic quality that Fallon says is extremely rare and extremely valuable. He's willing to be the joke. Not just willing. Eager. Chan, for all his muscle, for all his producer genius, for all his leadership gravitas, is one of the most self-deprecating members of Stray Kids. He will let the younger members roast him. He will let them tease him, mock his jokes, call him cringe, roll their eyes at his puns, and he won't just tolerate it, he'll encourage it. He'll set himself up as the target on purpose. And Fallon, who works with comedians constantly, said this is the hallmark of someone who understands comedy at a structural level, even if they don't realize it. The funniest person in the room, Fallon said, is often the person who makes everyone else funnier. And Chan does that by being the canvas other members paint their jokes on. He gives them material. He feeds them straight lines. He creates openings for them to be hilarious at his expense. That's not weakness. That's comedy architecture. That's leadership through laughter. Let's talk about specific moments, because the evidence is overwhelming. How many times have you watched a Stray Kids live or variety show appearance where Chan says something cheesy, and then the camera cuts to the other members reacting with exaggerated disgust? How many times has Changbin fake gagged at one of Chan's puns? How many times has Seungmin hit Chan with that deadpan stare that says, "I can't believe I'm in a group with you"? And how many times in all of those moments were you laughing? Not at Chan's joke itself, but at the entire exchange, the joke, the reaction, the dynamic, the whole ecosystem of comedy that Chan's terrible pun set into motion? That's what Fallon means by Trojan horse of comedy. Chan's jokes aren't the real weapon. Chan's jokes are the delivery system. The real weapon is the chain reaction they create. One bad pun from Chan generates 7 unique comedic reactions from 7 different members, each filtered through their own personality, and suddenly you have a comedy ensemble firing on all cylinders. All because one man had the courage to say something incredibly corny with a completely straight face. Fallon also analyzed Chan's physical comedy, and he was genuinely surprised by what he found. Chan, as most stays know, is built. The man works out religiously. His physique is genuinely impressive, to the point where it's become a running joke in the fandom. And Fallon noticed that Chan uses his physicality as a comedic tool in ways that are actually quite sophisticated. The flex moments that are just slightly too dramatic to be serious. The way he'll casually do something athletic and then react to his own performance with exaggerated surprise, as if his body did something his brain didn't authorize. The gym content where he's simultaneously being a serious fitness person and a complete goofball. Fallon compared this to Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's comedic approach, using an intimidating physical presence as a contrast device for humor. When a guy who looks like he could bench press a car does something silly, Fallon said, it's automatically funnier than when a regular-looking person does the same thing. Chan understands this intuitively. He knows his physicality is a comedic asset, not just an athletic one. And then there's the bilingual humor. Like Felix, Chan is Australian. English is his first language. But unlike Felix, whose bilingual comedy tends to be unintentional, Chan weaponizes his bilingualism deliberately. He code switches for comedic effect. He'll deliver a punchline in English that he knows the Korean-speaking members won't fully understand, creating a two-tiered joke where English-speaking fans get one layer of humor and the confused reactions of the other members create a second layer. Fallon, who has done bits with international guests on his show for years, recognized this technique immediately and was impressed by how naturally Chan deploys it. So why number 6? Why not higher? And this is where Fallon got surgical. He said Chan's comedy has one specific characteristic that limits his ceiling on a pure humor ranking: predictability. And he didn't mean that as an insult. He meant that Chan's comedic patterns, while effective and endearing, are consistent. You know what kind of joke Chan is going to make before he makes it? You know the dad pun is coming. You know the cheesy line is loaded. And while that predictability is actually a feature of his leadership comedy, because consistency creates comfort, it also means that Chan rarely surprises you. The members ranked above him on this list are members who keep you guessing, who zig when you expect them to zag, who produce comedic moments that you genuinely could not have predicted. Chan's comedy is reliable. Theirs is volatile. And in a ranking that measures pure comedic impact, volatility beats reliability every time. Fallon ended his Chan analysis with something that I think perfectly captures who Bang Chan is, not just as a comedian, but as a human being. He said, Bang Chan is the guy who builds the stage so everyone else can perform. His comedy isn't about being the star, it's about making sure the show is great. And if you ask me, that's the most underrated form of comedy there is. It doesn't get the headlines. It doesn't get the viral clips. But without it, nothing else works. Chan is the foundation. And you don't applaud foundations. You just trust them to hold everything up. Number 6. Bang Chan. The Trojan horse of comedy. The dad joke architect. The man who makes everyone around him funnier by being. Number 5. Seungmin, the savage surgeon who roasts with surgical precision. You know what's terrifying? Not a member who tries to be funny. Not a member who sets up elaborate jokes or goes out of his way to create comedic moments. No. What's truly terrifying is a member who can destroy you with a single look. One expression. One perfectly timed pause. One 3-word sentence delivered with the emotional temperature of an Arctic glacier. That is Kim Seungmin. And when Jimmy Fallon encountered Seungmin's comedic style for the first time, he didn't laugh immediately. He studied him. He leaned forward in his chair, squinted at the screen, watched the same clip 3 times in a row, and then said something that honestly made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. He said, "He doesn't tell jokes. He performs executions." And that right there is the most accurate description of Seungmin's humor that has ever been spoken in the English language. Kim Seungmin, born September 22, 2000, is Stray Kids' main vocalist alongside I.N and Han. His voice is clean, powerful, stable, the kind of voice that anchors a song and gives it emotional credibility. On stage, he's polished, professional, precise. He hits his notes with the reliability of a Swiss clock. And offstage? Offstage, he uses that same precision, that same meticulous accuracy to absolutely demolish his fellow members with the driest, sharpest, most lethally deadpan humor in the entire group. And Jimmy Fallon? A man who has spent his entire career surrounded by comedy legends? He said Seungmin's deadpan game is world class. Not K-pop class. Not idol class. World class. Let's talk about what makes deadpan comedy so difficult, because I think a lot of people underestimate it. Deadpan, also known as dry humor, is the art of saying something funny while showing absolutely no indication that you think it's funny. No smile. No wink. No change in vocal tone. Nothing. You deliver the line like you're reading a grocery list, and the audience has to figure out on their own that what you just said was devastating. It requires incredible control. Most people, when they say something funny, can't help but break. They smile. They giggle. Their eyes give it away. The anticipation of the laugh corrupts the delivery. But Seungmin? Seungmin delivers his kills with the facial expression of someone waiting for a bus. Complete neutrality. Total emotional flatline. And that's what makes it so devastating, because by the time your brain processes that what Seungmin just said was actually a brutal roast, he's already moved on. He's already looking at his phone or drinking water or staring into the middle distance like nothing happened. The bomb goes off after he's left the building. Fallon went deep into comedy theory on this one, and it was fascinating. He explained that in comedy, there are 2 primary archetypes, the comedian and the straight man. The comedian is the one who's obviously trying to be funny. They're animated, expressive. They signal that comedy is happening. The straight man is the opposite. The straight man plays it serious, plays it normal, and creates humor through contrast with the comedian's absurdity. Think of classic duos Abbott and Costello, where Abbott was the straight man. Or in more modern terms, think of Jim Halpert in The Office, whose deadpan reactions to Michael Scott's insanity were often funnier than Michael's actual antics. Fallon said Seungmin is the most naturally gifted straight man I've seen in a group dynamic in years. But here's the twist, Seungmin isn't just a straight man who reacts to other people's comedy. He's a straight man who attacks. He's an offensive straight man, if that makes sense. He doesn't wait for someone else to be funny and then react. He initiates. He identifies a target, loads his weapon, and fires, all while maintaining that impossible poker face that makes you question whether he even knows he's being funny. And the targets? Oh, the targets. If you're a stay, you already know. Hyunjin. Bang Chan. These 2 members exist in a perpetual state of being Seungmin's comedic punching bags, and the dynamic is glorious. Let's talk about the Seungmin-Hyunjin dynamic specifically, because Fallon spent a significant amount of time on this, and his analysis was genuinely brilliant. Hyunjin, as we discussed at number 8, is theatrical. He's expressive. He's dramatic. He reacts to everything with the intensity of a Shakespearean actor performing to the back row of a 3,000-seat theater. And Seungmin? Seungmin responds to all of that drama with the enthusiasm of a tax accountant reviewing a spreadsheet. The contrast is staggering. Hyunjin will have a full emotional meltdown about something trivial, arms flailing, voice rising, eyes widening, and Seungmin will just stare at him. Just stare. No words. No expression. Just this look that communicates, in perfect silence, "Are you done?" And that look, that one single expression of supreme unbotheredness, is funnier than 90% of the actual jokes that get told in any given Stray Kids video. Fallon lost it watching compilations of this dynamic. He said, "The funniest thing about Seungmin is that he makes other people funnier just by not reacting." Hyunjin becomes 10 times more dramatic because Seungmin won't give him the reaction he wants. It's a comedic arms race where one side keeps escalating and the other side keeps refusing to engage, and the audience wins every single time. And then there's Seungmin's relationship with Bang Chan's dad jokes, which Fallon described as one of the greatest comedy rivalries in entertainment history, and neither of them knows it. Every time Chan delivers one of his trademark terrible puns, Seungmin is right there with the most withering look of disappointment you've ever seen on a human face. It's not exaggerated. It's not performed. It's this genuine, bone-deep weariness that says, "I have heard 4,000 of these jokes, and each one has taken a year off my life." And Chan, to his absolute credit, feeds off this disapproval. He makes the jokes worse because he knows Seungmin's reaction will be the real punchline. It's a symbiotic comedic relationship that Fallon says operates on a level of sophistication that most professional comedy duos spend years trying to develop. Chan and Seungmin have it naturally, organically, without ever sitting down and planning it. But Seungmin's comedy isn't just about roasting and deadpan reactions. Fallon also identified something that he called Seungmin's stealth absurdity, moments where Seungmin does something genuinely weird and plays it completely straight, as if what he's doing is the most normal thing in the world. These moments are rarer than his roasts, but when they happen, they're absolutely electric because they shatter the expectation of Seungmin as the perpetual straight man. Suddenly, the guy who never breaks character is the absurd one, and your brain doesn't know how to process it because it violates everything you thought you knew about him. Fallon compared this to Bill Murray's comedic technique, the ability to do something completely bizarre with such total commitment and nonchalance that the audience questions whether it's actually bizarre or whether they're the weird ones for thinking it is. And speaking of commitment, let's talk about Seungmin's vocal comedy, because this is an underrated aspect that Fallon picked up on. Seungmin is a singer, a serious, technically proficient vocalist. And he uses that vocal ability as a comedic weapon in ways that are genuinely clever. The random singing. The dramatic vocal runs during mundane activities. The way he'll answer a simple question by singing the response in full operatic style. It's funny because it's an overdeployment of a serious skill in an unserious context. It's like watching a master chef prepare a 5-star meal for a hamster. The skill is real. The application is absurd. And the contrast between the two creates comedy. Fallon also noticed something about Seungmin's comedic intelligence that he said separates good comedians from great ones: timing awareness. Seungmin doesn't just know what to say. He knows when to say it. And more importantly, he knows when not to say anything at all. Some of his funniest moments are pure silence. A raised eyebrow at the right moment. A slow head turn that communicates volumes without a single word. A pause that stretches just long enough to build tension before he delivers a line so dry it could evaporate water. Fallon said this timing awareness is instinctive, not learned, and that it indicates a natural comedic intelligence that most people simply aren't born with. So why number 5? Why not top 3? And Fallon was very precise about this. He said Seungmin's comedy, as brilliant as it is, operates primarily in reaction mode. Even his offensive straight man attacks are fundamentally reactions to Chan's jokes, reactions to Hyunjin's drama, reactions to the chaos around him. And while reactive comedy can be devastatingly funny, and Seungmin proves this constantly, it's inherently limited by the material it's reacting to. The members ranked above Seungmin are members who generate comedic reality from nothing. They don't need someone else to set them up. They don't need chaos to react to. They create the chaos themselves. Seungmin is the best in the group at turning other people's moments into comedy. The members above him are the best at creating moments from scratch. Fallon also noted that Seungmin's consistency, while impressive, comes with a pattern. Number 4. I.N. The magne who plays innocent while burning the whole house down. Okay, let me ask you something before we even get into this. Be honest with yourself. When you think about Stray Kids and comedy, when you mentally run through the members and rank them by who makes you laugh the most, how quickly does I.N come to mind? Be honest. Really, truly honest. Because if you're like most days, if you're like most casual fans, if you're like most people who've only scratched the surface of Stray Kids content, I.N probably isn't in your top 3. Maybe not even top 4. He's the magne. He's the baby. He's the one with the bright smile and the fox eyes and the sweet demeanor that makes you want to protect him from the cruelties of the world. He's cute. And in the entertainment industry, cute and funny occupy very different territories in people's minds. But here's the thing, Jimmy Fallon doesn't have preconceptions. Jimmy Fallon doesn't carry fan biases. Jimmy Fallon sat down with fresh eyes and watched everything, and when he got to young Jeongin, when he spent time specifically studying the youngest member of Stray Kids, something happened that didn't happen with any other member on this list. Fallon got fooled. Completely, utterly, magnificently fooled. And then he got angry. Not real angry, comedian angry. The kind of angry where you realize someone just pulled off a trick so good that you didn't even know you were watching a trick. And when Fallon finally understood what I.N was doing, what he's been doing for years, he leaned back in his chair, shook his head slowly, and said, "This kid is a con artist. A comedy con artist. He's been running the longest, most elaborate comedic hustle I've ever seen, and nobody's caught him because he hides it behind that smile. This kid is dangerous." Jeongin. Born February 8, 2001. The youngest member of Stray Kids by a comfortable margin. The magne. And if you think being the magne in a K-pop group is just about being cute and getting babied by the older members, you fundamentally do not understand what I.N has turned that position into. Because I.N hasn't just accepted the magne role. He's reverse engineered it. He's taken every single expectation, every assumption, every bias that comes with being the youngest, and he's turned them into comedic weapons so sophisticated that Fallon spent twice as long analyzing him as he originally planned. Let's start with the foundation, the thing that makes everything else possible, the smile. I.N smile is, objectively, one of the most disarming things in K-pop. It's wide. It's genuine, it's warm, and it activates something primal in the human brain that says this person is harmless, this person is innocent, this person could not possibly have a mean bone in their body. And I.N knows this. He knows it with the awareness of a poker player who understands that his baby face is the greatest bluff in the history of the game. Because behind that smile, behind those sparkling fox eyes, behind that magne exterior, operates a comedic mind that Fallon described as genuinely devious. Here's the technique, and once you understand it, you will never watch I.N the same way again. Fallon called it the innocence trap. It works in 3 stages. Stage 1, I.N presents himself as the sweet, harmless, adorable magne. He does something cute. He smiles. He acts slightly shy. He positions himself as the baby brother who's just happy to be here. Stage 2, everyone in the room relaxes. The Hyungs let their guard down. The cameras aren't watching him because someone louder is doing something more obviously entertaining. The audience's attention drifts to whoever is currently the center of chaos. Stage 3, I.N strikes. A perfectly placed comment. A savage observation delivered with the most innocent voice imaginable. A physical comedy bit so unexpected that it takes a full 3 seconds for anyone to process what just happened. And by the time everyone reacts, I.N is already back in stage 1, smiling sweetly, looking innocent, playing the magne card as if nothing happened. Fallon watched this pattern play out over and over and over again across dozens of videos, and every single time, he was more impressed. "It's not a gimmick," he said. "It's a system." This kid has built an entire comedic infrastructure based on weaponized innocence, and he deploys it with the precision of a military operation. He picks his moment. He chooses his target. He executes. And then he vanishes back into cuteness before anyone can hold him accountable. It's brilliant. And let's talk about specific dynamics, because I.N's comedy doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's deeply intertwined with his relationships within the group, and Fallon analyzed each one separately. The I.N and Bang Chan dynamic is one that Fallon found particularly hilarious. Chan is the leader. Chan is the oldest. Chan is the protective father figure who literally nurtured these members through trainee years and debut stress, and the emotional roller coaster of idol life. And I.N, as the youngest, is theoretically the member Chan should have the most authority over. But in reality, I.N treats Chan with a level of casual disrespect that is so perfectly calibrated it becomes art. He'll ignore Chan's dad jokes with calculated disinterest. He'll respond to Chan's attempts at being cool with the energy of a teenager whose parent just tried to use slang. He'll reject Chan's affection in the most dramatic way possible and then immediately seek it out from another member, just to watch Chan's soul leave his body. And it's all done with that smile. That innocent, beautiful, smile that makes it impossible to get mad at him. Fallon said, I.N has discovered something that every great comedian knows. You can say anything if you smile while you say it. The smile is a diplomatic passport. It lets him cross borders that would get anyone else arrested. Then there's the I.N and Lino dynamic, which Fallon described as two predators pretending to be prey. Lino, as we'll discuss later, is a comedic force of nature. And I.N is one of the only members who can go toe-to-toe with Lino's chaos and not just survive but thrive. Because I.N matches Lino's energy not with equal chaos, but with equal intelligence. Where Lino attacks with absurdity, I.N counters with innocence. Where Lino goes big, I.N goes small. They're playing the same game with completely different strategies, and watching them interact is like watching a chess match where both players are pretending they don't know how to play chess. Fallon was fascinated by what he called I.N's comedic growth arc. And this is something that longtime stays will feel in their bones, because it's true, I.N has gotten exponentially funnier over the years. In early Stray Kids content, Jeongin was genuinely shy. He was the quiet magne who was still finding his footing, still figuring out his place in a group of loud, chaotic, intensely talented older brothers. His humor was minimal, tentative, safe. But as the years passed, as he grew more comfortable, as he matured from a teenager into a young adult, something shifted. The confidence came. And with the confidence came the comedy. And not just any comedy, sophisticated comedy. Comedy that requires awareness of social dynamics, timing, audience expectations, and group psychology. Fallon said, I.N's evolution is the most compelling comedic origin story in this group. He went from being the kid who laughed at other people's jokes to being the person who makes the jokes, and he did it so gradually that nobody noticed the power shift until it was already complete. And here's something that Fallon pointed out that I think is genuinely underappreciated, I.N's physical comedy. Now, I.N isn't known for physical comedy the way some other members are. But Fallon noticed something subtle and extremely effective. I.N uses his body language as a comedic tool, specifically through what Fallon called strategic cuteness deployment. He can turn cuteness on and off like a switch. 1 second, he's a grown man making a savage comment about a Hyung's fashion choices, and the next second, he's doing EGO so aggressively adorable that the savage comment gets completely forgiven. It's a loop. Attack, deploy cuteness, get forgiven, attack again. And the cycle never breaks because the cuteness always works. Fallon compared this to a specific technique used by comedians like Melissa McCarthy, the ability to toggle between intimidating and endearing so rapidly that the audience never settles into a single perception. You're constantly off balance with I.N, constantly adjusting your read on him, and that instability is the comedy. You never know which version of I.N you're going to get at any given moment, and that uncertainty is genuinely, consistently hilarious. Fallon also spent time analyzing I.N's laugh, which might sound like a strange thing to analyze, but Fallon argued it's actually critical. I.N has one of those laughs that is itself a comedic instrument. It's loud, it's full-bodied, it's contagious, and it often arrives at exactly the right moment to amplify someone else's joke. Fallon said, "Half the time, I wasn't laughing at the original joke. I was laughing because I.N's reaction to the joke was so Number 3. Lino. The chaotic god whose comedy has no rules, no script, no mercy. I can already hear it. I can hear the keyboard smashing. I can hear the group chats exploding. I can hear millions of stays across the globe screaming at their screens right now because Lee Miho, Lino, the man who has been universally, almost religiously declared the funniest member of Stray Kids by virtually every corner of the internet, is sitting at number 3. Not 2. Not 1. 3. And before you close this video, before you rage quit into the comments, before you declare Jimmy Fallon a fraud who has no right to analyze comedy ever again, I need you to do something for me. I need you to listen. Because Fallon's reasoning for this placement is not just valid, it's one of the most insightful pieces of comedic analysis I've ever encountered. And by the time I'm done explaining it, you're either going to grudgingly agree or you're going to be so impressed by his argument that you'll disagree respectfully. Either way, you're going to understand why Lino is at number 3, and you're going to understand why the 2 members above him earned their spots. But first, and I cannot stress this enough, we need to talk about what Lino is. Because Jimmy Fallon didn't just analyze Lino. He experienced Lino. And the experience fundamentally changed how Fallon thinks about comedy. Lee Miho. Born October 25, 1998. Main dancer of Stray Kids. Former backup dancer for BTS. Catfather to the holy trinity of Suni, Doonji, and Dory. And the single most unpredictable human being that Fallon says he has ever studied in his entire professional career. Not one of the most unpredictable. The most unpredictable. Out of thousands of entertainers Fallon has encountered over 2 decades in the industry, he says Lino operates on a comedic wavelength that he has never seen before. And that's not hyperbole. Fallon was dead serious when he said it, and his explanation for why he was serious gave me genuine chills. Here's what Fallon said, and I need you to really sit with this. Every comedian I've ever met operates within a system. Even the most spontaneous, most improvisational comedians have patterns. They have tendencies. They have a comedic gravity that pulls their humor toward certain types of jokes, certain delivery styles, certain targets. You watch them long enough, and you start to see the architecture beneath the chaos. Lino has no architecture. Lino has no patterns. Lino operates in a state of pure comedic entropy, and I genuinely do not understand how his brain works. Pure comedic entropy. Let that sink in. Fallon, a man who has built an empire on understanding comedy, who has dissected the techniques of every comedy legend from Robin Williams to Eddie Murphy to Tina Fey, watched hours and hours of Lino content, and came to the conclusion that he cannot figure out the system because there is no system. Lino doesn't follow comedic rules. He doesn't follow anyone's rules. He doesn't even follow his own rules. He is, in Fallon's words, a walking comedy anomaly, a glitch in the matrix of entertainment, a person who has somehow achieved peak humor by refusing to acknowledge that humor has structure. Let's break down what makes Lino's comedy so impossibly unique, because Fallon went deep on this. He identified several distinct comedic modes that Lino cycles through, not in any predictable order, not with any detectable trigger, but seemingly at random, guided by nothing except whatever his brain decides to do in any given microsecond. Mode 1, the deadpan absurdist. This is the Lino that most people reference when they call him funny. The one who says something so bizarre, so completely disconnected from the context of the conversation, so utterly left field that everyone in the room experiences a collective brain malfunction. He'll be in the middle of a normal group discussion and suddenly say something that has absolutely nothing to do with what anyone is talking about, delivered with the tone and facial expression of someone who believes they've just made a completely reasonable contribution. And the room breaks. Not because the statement itself is inherently funny, but because the commitment to the absurdity is so total, so unwavering, that your brain can't reconcile what you're hearing with the sincerity of the delivery. Fallon compared this mode to Andy Kaufman, the legendary performance artist who blurred the line between comedy and genuine insanity so thoroughly that audiences were never sure if they were watching a show or witnessing a mental breakdown in real time. Lino has that same quality, Fallon said. You're never completely sure if he's joking. And that uncertainty is one of the most powerful comedic tools in existence. Mode 2, the physical chaos agent. Lino's body is a comedic instrument that operates independently of his brain, or at least that's what it looks like. The random dances. The sudden movements that have no context or purpose. The way he'll touch other members in ways that are simultaneously affectionate and aggressive and confusing and hilarious all at once. The wrestling. The chasing. The moments where he'll grab someone, usually Han, usually when Han least expects it, and do something so physically bizarre that the other members can only stand there and watch like witnesses to a natural disaster. Fallon pointed out that Lino's physical comedy is unique because it's not performative. Most physical comedians telegraph their bits. You can see them setting up the pratfall, positioning for the gag. Lino doesn't telegraph anything. The physical comedy erupts like a volcano, no warning, no build-up, no chance to prepare. 1 second he's standing normally, and the next second he's doing something that defies explanation. Fallon said he rewound Lino's physical comedy moments more than any other member's content because he kept trying to find the moment before the split second where Lino decides to do something chaotic, and he could never find it. There is no moment before, Fallon concluded. He doesn't decide. He just does. Mode 3, the Tsundere Assassin. And this is the mode that Fallon found most fascinating from a comedic psychology perspective. Lino's tsundere behavior, showing affection through apparent hostility, being sweet by being savage, caring deeply while pretending not to care at all, is a comedic goldmine that Fallon says is functionally impossible to replicate. Because tsundere comedy only works if the audience knows the person actually loves the target of their hostility. If Lino was genuinely mean, his savage moments would be uncomfortable, not funny. But because everyone knows, the members know, the fans know, the cameras know, that Lino loves his members with a ferocity that borders on parental, every roast, every rejection. Every moment of apparent coldness becomes comedy because it's dripping with invisible affection. Fallon compared this to the comedic dynamic between Simon Cowell and contestants on talent shows. The harshness is entertaining because you sense the underlying respect and investment. But Fallon said Lino does it better than Cowell because Lino's love language is so deeply encoded in his hostility that decoding it has become a fan sport, and fan sports generate engagement that no amount of marketing can buy. And then there's the cats. Fallon could not stop talking about Lino and his cats. Sunny, Doonji, and Dory, 3 cats that have become almost as famous as Lino himself. Fallon analyzed Lino's cat content and said it reveals something crucial about his comedic DNA. Lino treats his cats the same way he treats his members. The same tsundere energy. The same mixture of genuine devotion and performative indifference. The same chaotic interactions that oscillate between tender and unhinged. Fallon said, the way Lino interacts with his cats is the purest expression of his comedic identity because cats are the only creatures on Earth who match his energy. Cats are also unpredictable, also indifferent to rules, also capable of switching from affectionate to chaotic in 0 seconds. Lino didn't choose cats. Cats chose him because they recognized a kindred spirit. Now, here's why he's number 3. And I need you to pay very close attention because this reasoning is sophisticated and it demands that you set aside your bias for a moment. Fallon acknowledged everything I just described. He acknowledged that Lino's comedy is unprecedented, that his unpredictability is unmatched, that his comedic modes are diverse and powerful and genuinely unique in the entertainment landscape. He acknowledged all of it. And then he said something that reframed the entire ranking. Lino's weakness is the same as his strength. His unpredictability means you never know what you're going to get, and that's thrilling. But it also means he doesn't always know what he's going to get. His comedy is lightning, brilliant, powerful, impossible to ignore. But lightning doesn't strike on command. The 2 members I've ranked above him have something Lino lacks: control. Not control of their humor, but control of the room. Lee No changes the atmosphere of a room by existing in it. The two above him change the atmosphere of a room by choosing to change it. They can turn comedy on and off like a faucet. Lee No's comedy is a river, it flows where it flows, and you follow it. Theirs is a weapon they am. Fallon elaborated further. He said Lee No's comedic output, while frequently genius level, has what he called variance. Some moments are transcendently funny, the kind of Number 2. Han. The born entertainer who turns every second into a comedy show. Let me paint a picture for you right now. Imagine you're Jimmy Fallon. You've been hosting The Tonight Show for over a decade. You've sat across from literally every major entertainer on the planet, actors, musicians, comedians, athletes, politicians, royalty. You've seen it all. You've heard every joke format. You've witnessed every comedy style. You've analyzed every entertainer's technique. Nothing surprises you anymore. Nothing. And then you watch Han Ji-sung for the first time. And within 5 minutes of watching this compact, squirrel-faced, impossibly energetic human being tear through a variety show segment like a one-man comedy hurricane, Jimmy Fallon does something he says he hasn't done in years. He pauses. He takes his headphones off. He sits in silence for a moment. And then he says, very quietly, almost reverently, "Where has this kid been all my life?" That's the effect Han Ji-sung has on people who understand comedy at a professional level. Not just fans who love him. Not just stays who've watched him grow up. Professionals. People who do this for a living. Because Han isn't just funny. Han is what Fallon calls a comedy ecosystem unto himself, a person so overflowing with comedic ability that he could sustain an entire entertainment show alone, without co-stars, without writers, without a script, without anything except a camera and his own bottomless well of chaotic genius. Han Ji-sung. Born September 14, 2000. Main rapper, vocalist, and producer of Stray Kids. 1/3 of the legendary production Unit 3 Racha alongside Bang Chan and Changbin. A lyricist whose words have moved millions. A rapper whose technical skill puts him in conversations with the best in the industry. And somehow, on top of all that creative brilliance, he is also one of the most naturally gifted comedic performers that Fallon says has ever existed in the idol industry. Not one of the funniest idols. One of the funniest performers. Period. Across all entertainment. And Fallon spent an enormous amount of time explaining why that distinction matters. Here's the core of Fallon's analysis, and it starts with a concept he calls comedic bandwidth. Bandwidth, in comedy, refers to the range of comedic tools a person can deploy. Some comedians are one-trick ponies. They do one thing really well and they lean on it. Some have 2 or 3 modes they cycle between. The great ones, the Robin Williamses, the Jim Carreys, the Eddie Murphys in their prime, have wide bandwidth. They can do physical comedy and verbal wit and impressions and improvisation and emotional comedy and absurdist humor. They're Swiss Army knives. And Han? Fallon said Han's comedic bandwidth is the widest I've seen in someone under 30, and it's not even close. Let's catalog it, because the sheer volume of comedic tools in Han's arsenal is staggering. Tool 1. Facial expressions. Han's face is a comedy instrument that operates at a level Fallon described as almost cartoonish, but in the best possible way. The range of expressions this man can produce in a single second is physically impossible for most human faces. Fear, excitement, disgust, surprise, joy, devastation, confusion. Han doesn't just show these emotions. He performs them with such exaggerated intensity that each expression becomes a standalone comedy bit. Fallon compared Han's facial expressiveness to Jim Carrey, and before you think that's an exaggeration, Fallon was very specific about why the comparison is valid. He said, Carrey's genius was that he could make you laugh without saying a word, just by moving his face. Han has that same ability. His face tells jokes that his mouth doesn't even need to deliver. And the thing about Han's expressions is that they're not just random mugging for the camera. They're reactive. They respond to what's happening around him in real time, creating a running commentary of facial comedy that operates as a secondary entertainment channel during any group activity. You can watch a Stray Kids video focused on another member and keep Han in your peripheral vision, and you'll get an entirely separate comedy show just from his face. Fallon said he actually tested this. He watched a full Stray Kids variety appearance twice, once focusing on the main action and once focusing exclusively on Han's reactions in the background, and he said Han's background performance was funnier than most comedians' foreground performance. Tool 2. Vocal comedy. Han's voice is a weapon of mass entertainment. He can modulate his tone, pitch, volume, and speed with the precision of a trained voice actor, and he deploys this ability constantly. The sudden shifts from normal speaking voice to high-pitched screaming. The character voices that appear out of nowhere. The sound effects he produces that are so accurate they sound like they came from a professional Foley studio. The way he'll narrate his own actions in real time like a sports commentator covering the most mundane activity in history. Fallon was particularly impressed by Han's ability to create vocal characters, distinct speaking personas that he invents on the spot and commits to with full dedication. Most comedians need writers to create characters, Fallon said. Han creates them in real time, fully formed, with distinct vocal signatures, and then discards them after one use because he has an unlimited supply. That's not comedy. That's a superpower. Tool 3. Physical comedy. And this is where Fallon started to really separate Han from Lino, because both members are known for physical humor, but their approaches are fundamentally different. Lino's physical comedy is unpredictable. It erupts without warning and follows no pattern. Han's physical comedy is theatrical. It's big. It's intentional. It's designed to be seen. Han throws his entire body into bits. He commits with every fiber of his being. When Han does a pratfall, it's not a small stumble. It's a full body collapse that looks like he was hit by an invisible truck. When Han reacts physically to something surprising, he doesn't flinch. He launches himself backward like the surprise had physical force. Everything is amplified, everything is maximized, and the amplification is precisely calibrated to be funny without being annoying. And that calibration, Fallon noted, is what separates amateur physical comedy from professional-grade physical comedy. Anyone can fall down, Fallon said. The question is whether they can fall down in a way that's funny every single time, and Han can. His body understands comedy the way a musician's hands understand an instrument. Tool 4. Improvisation. This is the big one. This is the tool that Fallon says elevates Han from extremely funny person to genuine comedic prodigy. Han can improvise comedy at a speed and quality that Fallon called superhuman. He doesn't need setups. He doesn't need time to think. He doesn't need a partner to play off of, although he's devastatingly effective with partners. Give Han any situation, any context, any prompt, any random stimulus, and he will produce comedy from it instantly. Not in 5 seconds. Not after a beat. Instantly. The joke is there before you've finished processing the setup, because Han's brain is running comedy algorithms at a speed that Fallon genuinely struggles to explain. Fallon told a story about a specific moment that broke him. It was during a Stray Kids fan interaction where a fan asked Han an unexpected question, and Han's response was so immediately, so perfectly, so devastatingly funny that the entire room erupted, and even the other members, who were used to Han being hilarious, were visibly shocked by how fast and how perfectly he landed the joke. Fallon rewatched that moment multiple times and tried to calculate the gap between the question ending and the joke beginning. He estimated it was less than half a second. That's not thinking, Fallon said. That's reflex. His comedy is a reflex. It's hardwired into his nervous system. And then there's what Fallon called the Han Jisung paradox, and this is where the analysis got genuinely philosophical. The paradox is this: Han is simultaneously the loudest and the most vulnerable comedian in Stray Kids. His comedy is big, explosive, attention-commanding, impossible to ignore. But underneath that comedy, powering it like a hidden engine, is a deep emotional sensitivity that Han has been open about throughout his career. He's talked about anxiety. He's talked about self-doubt. He's talked about the pressure of performing and the fear of not being enough. And Fallon said this vulnerability is actually the secret ingredient that makes Han's comedy transcend entertainment and become something genuinely meaningful. The funniest people in history, Fallon said, are almost always the most sensitive. Robin Williams, Richard Pryor, Hannah Gadsby. The depth of their comedy comes from the depth of their feeling. They make you laugh because they understand pain. And Han has that quality at 25 years old. His comedy isn't escape from emotion, it's expression of emotion. He's not running from his sensitivity. He's channeling it into laughter, and that's why his comedy hits different. It's why you don't just laugh at Han, you feel connected to him when you laugh. Because somewhere beneath the joke, you sense the real person, and that realness makes the laughter deeper. Number 1. Changbin, the dark horse who made Jimmy Fallon lose his mind. This is it. This is the moment. And I know that right now, a significant portion of you just did a double take. You scrolled back up. You reread the name. You checked if maybe, just maybe, there was a typo. Because Changbin? Changbin? The dark rapper? The guy with the aggressive stage presence and the voice that sounds like thunder wrapped in lightning? The spear bee who spits bars so hard they leave bruises on the beat? That Changbin is Jimmy Fallon's number 1 pick for the funniest member of Stray Kids? Yes. Yes. 1,000 times yes. And before you riot, before you storm the comments, before you write a 12-paragraph essay about why Han or Lino was robbed, I need you to understand something. Jimmy Fallon didn't just casually pick Changbin. He didn't throw a dart at a board. He didn't flip a coin. Fallon watched everything. He analyzed every member with the precision of a surgeon and the passion of a lifelong student of comedy. And when he was done, when all the data was processed, when all the clips were reviewed, when all the comedic theory was applied, Changbin wasn't just his number 1 pick. Changbin was his number 1 pick by a mile. And the reason why is something that Fallon says fundamentally changed how he thinks about comedy itself. Changbin. Born August 11th, 1999. Main rapper of Stray Kids. 1/3 of 3 Racha. A lyricist of staggering depth. A performer whose stage presence is so intense, so commanding, so ferociously powerful that people who see him perform live for the first time often describe the experience as intimidating. This is a man who has written and delivered some of the hardest, most emotionally devastating rap verses in 4th-generation K-pop. His voice is a weapon. His flow is relentless. His wordplay in Korean is so sophisticated that native speakers have to listen multiple times to catch every layer. On stage, Changbin is a force, compact, explosive, radiating an energy that makes arenas feel small. And that is precisely why he's number 1. Not despite the intensity. Because of it. Fallon's thesis, and honestly, this might be the most brilliant piece of comedic analysis I've encountered in years, centers on a concept he calls the duality coefficient. It's not a real academic term. Fallon made it up specifically for Changbin because he said no existing comedic framework could adequately capture what Changbin does. The duality coefficient, as Fallon defines it, measures the distance between a person's serious persona and their comedic persona. The greater the distance, the funnier the comedy, because the contrast generates exponentially more surprise, more cognitive dissonance, more sheer delight in the audience. And Changbin's duality coefficient? Fallon says it's the highest he's ever measured in any entertainer, living or dead. Think about that. The distance between Spearby, the dark, ferocious, bar-spitting beast who looks like he could end your career with a single verse, and Binny, the soft, squishy, EGO-doing, cheek-squishing, puppy energy goofball who giggles at his own jokes and gets sulky when the members don't pay attention to him. That distance is astronomical. It's not a gap. It's a canyon. It's a universe between two personas that somehow, impossibly, miraculously, coexist inside the same human being. And every single time Changbin transitions from one to the other, every single time that switch flips, it produces comedy so pure, so involuntary, so fundamentally irresistible that Fallon said he found himself laughing before his brain even processed why he was laughing. It's precognitive humor, Fallon said. Your body laughs before your mind understands the joke. That's the rarest form of comedy on earth, and Changbin triggers it constantly. Let's get into specifics, because Fallon went absolutely granular on this analysis. He broke Changbin's comedy into what he called the 5 pillars of Changbin comedy, and each pillar alone would be enough to make someone funny. The fact that Changbin has all 5 operating simultaneously is what made Fallon declare him number 1 without hesitation. Pillar 1, Egeo devastation. This is the big one. This is the signature move. This is the thing that, once you've seen it, you can never unsee, and it will live in your brain rent-free for the rest of your natural life. Changbin doing Egeo. Let me describe it for anyone who hasn't witnessed this phenomenon, although I honestly don't know how you could be watching this video and not have seen it. Changbin, this muscular, deep-voiced, intense rapper who looks like he bench presses his problems, will, without any warning, suddenly switch into the most aggressively adorable Egeo you have ever seen. We're talking baby voice. We're talking pouty lips. We're talking finger hearts and cheek squishing and full body cute that is so violently contradictory to his normal presence that your brain experiences something close to a system error. It doesn't compute. The visual data your eyes are receiving does not match the audio data your ears are processing, and in that moment of beautiful, glorious cognitive failure, you laugh. You laugh so hard it hurts. You laugh because your body literally doesn't know what else to do with the information it's receiving. And Fallon? Fallon broke watching Changbin Egeo compilations. I mean, genuinely broke. He had to stop the video multiple times because he was laughing so hard he couldn't breathe. And when he recovered, he said something that I think perfectly encapsulates why this works. I've watched Jim Carrey contort his body into impossible shapes. I've watched Robin Williams channel 12 characters in 30 seconds. I've watched the greatest comedians in history do their most legendary bits. And none of them made me laugh as hard as watching this rapper pretend to be a baby. None. Because none of them had the contrast that Changbin has. The comedy isn't in the Egeo itself. The comedy is in the impossibility of the Egeo coming from that person. It breaks reality. It breaks physics. It breaks everything I know about comedy, and it's the funniest thing I've ever seen. Pillar 2, self-deprecating genius. Changbin is short. By idol standards, by Korean male standards, by any standard you want to apply, Changbin is on the shorter side. And he knows it. And instead of being insecure about it, instead of ignoring it, instead of being sensitive when people bring it up, Changbin has turned his height into one of the most effective self-deprecating comedy bits in all of K-pop. He jokes about it constantly. He leans into it. He makes the joke before anyone else can, and he makes it better than anyone else could. Fallon identified this as comedy ownership, the technique of taking your most obvious vulnerability and claiming it so completely that nobody else can use it against you. The best self-deprecating comedians, Fallon said, don't just acknowledge their weaknesses. They celebrate them. They turn them into superpowers. Changbin has taken his height and turned it into a comedy empire. Every short joke he makes is simultaneously humble and powerful because it says, I see what you see, and I think it's funnier than you do. That's supreme comedic confidence. Pillar 3, the freestyle wildcard. Changbin is one of the most skilled freestyle rappers in K-pop. His ability to construct bars in real time is genuinely astonishing. But here's what Fallon noticed. Changbin uses freestyle not just as a musical tool, but as a comedy tool. He'll freestyle about the most absurd topics imaginable. He'll drop bars about what he had for lunch. He'll rap about another member's fashion choices. He'll create entire freestyle compositions about his cats, or about losing at a game, or about being hungry, and he delivers these ridiculous lyrics with the same intensity, the same flow, the same technical precision that he uses for his serious music. And that contrast, devastating technical skill applied to utterly trivial content, is comedy gold. And that's the thing about Stray Kids, isn't it? 8 members. 8 completely different comedic identities. Not a single overlap. Not a single duplicate. Each one funny in a way that no other member could replicate. Hyunjin's precision. Felix's warmth. Chan's architecture. Seungmin's sharpness. I.N stealth. Leeno's chaos. Han's versatility. Changbin's duality. Remove any one of them, and the entire comedy ecosystem collapses. They don't just make each other funnier, they make each other possible. And maybe that's the real answer to this ranking. Maybe the real number one isn't a single member at all. Maybe the real number one is the group, 8 people who, through some miracle of chemistry and fate and years of growing up together, created a comedic dynamic that no casting director could engineer, no management company could manufacture, and no other group could ever replicate. Jimmy Fallon ranked them 1 through 8. But Stray Kids? Stray Kids ranked together is something that comedy has never seen before. And honestly, it might never see again. This has been the full breakdown. Thank you for watching. Thank you for staying. And if this ranking made you laugh, made you think, or made you want to go rewatch every Stray Kids video ever made, then this list did exactly what it was supposed to do. Stay funny, stay.